Oh, welcome everybody. I can think of no better time to have a celebration of impactful Black women, how to arrive and thrive in powerful places, which is for us a multiple celebration of Black women's achievement. And coming on the heels of what will probably be the first Black woman Supreme Court justice, I can think of no better time. And to do this during Women's History Month. So we have much to celebrate today. Get Connected is so proud of our 14 years as Boston's premier cross-cultural networking business event that has expanded into an entire ecosystem. We have the GK ExecuSearch, which was launched a year and a half ago to really help companies and institutions diversify their C-suites and their corporate boards. We have the GK Jobs, GK Market, which was launched during the pandemic to support women and BIPOC and LGBTQ and also veteran entrepreneurs to sell their goods and services and to make them available. And of course, the GK Fund, which is a 501c3 social impact fund founded in the wake of George Floyd's murder to support BIPOC and women-owned businesses battling what I like to call the twin-demic of COVID-19 and systemic racial and gender inequality, along with the rapid rise of today across-the-board inflation that's crippling small business. I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to both Juliet Mayers and to Stephanie Brown. Juliet is a founding member and at the time was the head of multicultural marketing for Blue Cross Blue Shield when Get Connected was started 14 years ago and was one of the first corporate partners. And I want to give a shout out to Stephanie Brown, who has continued that tradition of partnering with Get Connected. So thank you both for your support, for your contribution, and for your continual belief that Get Connected serves a very important purpose in our community. Last year at this time, Get Connected created a historic list, a first of its kind, of a powerful cohort of 163 of Boston's most impactful Black women to salute these tremendous women leaders across industries, professions, and sectors who consistently contribute and amplify professional and personal achievement throughout Greater Boston. And I am so proud to say every woman on this panel, including our moderators, were on that list. What a list it was. And I also want to give a shout out to PNC Bank and NBC 10 Boston, who are the sponsors of today's event. Last week, the nation saw firsthand, up close and personal, the struggles, the biases, the microaggressions that Black women face every day as the calm, poised, brilliant Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson handled and resisted and negated the deplorable taunting by US sitting senators of the United States Senate with grace, with class, with dignity. She made us all feel proud. And these were people who were determined to derail her appointment and history making to become the first Black woman on the US Supreme Court. Judge Jackson, despite it all, soared above this despicable treatment by what I could only refer to as bullies, and behaved like the ignorant bigots that they are. We felt her power and we felt her pain. That is why we, as a collective group of Black women, have chosen today to come together in this forum, like this one, to plan the future and to plot a new narrative and to shift the paradigm. We will open this event with a one-on-one interview with the dynamic Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten, president of Simmons University and a partner on this event, whose new book, Arrive and Thrive, 7 Impactful Practices for Women, will be published and released in just a few weeks. And the Emmy Award-winning NBC 10 broadcast journalist and anchor, and my dear friend and fellow Emersonian, LaToya Edwards. LaToya has been a star in Boston and Massachusetts, and of the NBC 10 Boston and New England cable news family since 2005. Following that, we will segue into a fireside chat, which will include Dr. Wooten, conducted by the young, up-and-coming Ms. Paris Alston, the new co-host of Morning Edition at GBH News. She was the host of NPR podcast, Consider This. She produced in conjunction with GBH and WBUR. Paris has also served as the host of GBH's Keep It Social, about social media trends targeting millennial and Gen Z audiences. She has reported on stories from Southeast Asia to Morocco to Panama and Brazil, and truly represents the next generation of rising Black stars and Black women leaders. Our rock star lineup includes Agnes Bundy Scanlon, my friend of almost 30 years, Esquire, president of the Cambridge Group, who was recognized as one of Savoy's most influential Black corporate directors in 2021. Agnes's background includes expertise in governance, regulatory and risk management, digital law, and data information security fields. She's also an experienced strategic thought leader and partner and advisor to industry, government, financial, and technology companies. Agnes has built a sterling reputation for her contributions to the international business community, as well as on Capitol Hill and the executive branch. Stephanie Brown, Chief Diversity Officer of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Massachusetts, who is responsible for recruiting, retaining, advancing, and developing high performance staff and a thriving inclusive culture at the leading Bay State company that has put DE&I at the core of its business. Her expertise includes healthcare digital strategy, operations delivery, strategic planning, brand management, business metrics, design and turnover specialist. And her boss, Andrew Dreyfus, will tell you that while DE&I is supported by him, it is Stephanie that has contributed to changing the culture and the look of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Juliet Mayers, as I mentioned, a founding member and sponsor of Get Connected, is the CEO of the Inspiration Zone. And I don't want to tell you how long I've known Juliet, and has for over 30 years of marketing, financial service strategy, and leadership development experience. She recently launched a highly successful podcast called Entering the Inspiration Zone, focused on how to create powerful connections and robust professional development. She's also an author, a coach, and a frequent speaker on the critical role of networking, personal development to elevate the DE&I leadership. And I'm going to ask all of you to please, please, please tweet and put this out. With the hashtags will be in the chat. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. It is with great pleasure that I now turn this event over to the fabulous LaToya and the brilliant Dr. Wooten.
Wow, thank you so much. Colette Phillips, as always, I'm so inspired by you. I'm honored to be a part of anything that you're a part of, and Get Connected continues to take everything that we all are working so hard for to the next level. It is an honor to be even in your company and to be at this event. It's so great that we are celebrating the 14th anniversary. It's so great that we are celebrating Women's History Month. It's so great that we're celebrating the impact of Black women, especially in this state, in this community. So this is so much to talk about. And then of course we get to speak to Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten right now and her amazing book, Arrive and Thrive. I have a limited amount of time, Dr. Wooten, but I'm going to dig in as much as I can. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, I'm blown away, and I feel lucky that I got an advanced look at what you've been working on. And I want everybody to check this out, because if you've ever had something just speak to your soul, what you have in the book, The 7 Practices, immediately grabbed me. So we have the 7 practices: investing in your best self, embracing authenticity, cultivating courage, fostering resilience, inspiring a bold vision, creating a healthy team environment, committing to the work of the inclusive leader. I mean, are you talking directly in my brain, into my heart right now? Thank you for this work. How'd you even narrow it down to that research? Because you could have gone in so many different directions. Why that specifically?
That is a great question, and thank you. And I like to start my day seeing you on TV, so it's good to see you in Zoom and all you do for our Boston community.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So when I was took the Simmons presidency, there was an arranged marriage of the other 2 authors. So my author is Susan Brady, who leads our Institute for Inclusive Leadership here at Simmons, and then Janet Fowdy, who is the chairwoman at Deloitte Consulting Firm. And we knew right away that we wanted to write a book where all women could think about, how do we create this continuous cycle of arriving and thriving? And we all know that it's a continuous cycle. We're always evolving and becoming our best selves. And we wanted the book to be grounded in research, but we also wanted women to have tools that they could take away and use the practices. And we wanted to have real life interviews with women who had been successful. And so we started, I'm a researcher, I'm a scholar. We started in this massive interview process of asking women, what are the best practices for arriving and thriving? We got multiple practices, 20 and 30 practices. And we did what we call a content analysis in my field. And we narrowed it down to 7 gifts that we hope women can use to arrive and thrive in their careers, LaToya.
Well, I have to say, and it's not in a commercial, it's the truth. the gems the nuggets that you give us, I mean, you just pack them in your pocket and you carry them with you, especially in tough times in this world that we live in, trying to be our best. And so I just want to dig into some of them. We may not get to all of them, but investing in your best self. I mean, investing in your best self could sound like an Oprah slogan, but then when you get down into it, you have to dig a little deeper. And I saw that what touched me is the research when you spoke to women in the field, and it said something like, does it feel like when your best self is blocked? And your book talked about some stuff that would hit home with everybody. When your best self is blocked, overwhelmed, inadequate, gutted, incompetent. Wow. And then you talk about how at Simmons Leadership School, how there's a specific exercise, RBSE, that digs into that and addresses it and deals with it and gets it out, pulls out the root and gets us back on the right path. Talk about that a little bit.
You know, if we're going to stand out in this world, we can only do it from our strengths. Mm-hmm. And so each person needs to know what they look like when they're at their best and what their strengths are. You know, and now I'm not saying to ignore your weaknesses. You have to work on those too, but your strengths are how you own your stage. It's how you show up. And so knowing your best self at a young age is important. And there's an exercise that was designed at the University of Michigan, but we do it at Simmons, called the Reflected Best Self. And it's an exercise where you collect stories about who you are at your best. You ask your top 20 people, your colleagues, your friends, your family members, and you create this portrait. And you use that reflected best self portrait as your superpowers to lead the world. It helps you provide a roadmap about what type of organizations you want to work at, what are your strengths, what careers you want to pursue, and how we all show up to be that superwoman. And so owning your best self and being authentic about it is the start of these impactful practices, LaToya.
I love it. You know, it's always something to talk about courage, because that can be a loaded word. And you have a practice in there called cultivating courage. And when I hear cultivation, I say, okay, if I don't have it, I'm going to gin it up right now. You know, and specifically, you talk about something that takes bravery, being able to admit to something the stuff you don't know. Because in this world, especially as a woman leader, and you walk into a room full of men, it's not easy to say, well, I don't quite have the expertise in that. But to be able to call it out and have the bravery behind it, there is courage in that, but also there is power in that. Can you expound upon that?
You know, courage is hard, and courage and confidence go together. And there are lots of tools that we give in the book for cultivating courage. And one is to be vulnerable. None of us know everything. And that's why I often talk about, we all need our personal board of directors, and we need our partners that we team up with, so that we can have the courage to activate and do what we want to do. So courage is really important. The other thing is that learning. Part of the reason why I stayed in higher education is because the more you learn, the more courage you can have. Because learning is powerful, knowledge and acquiring that. And then we know sometimes that, you know, women don't have courage. And sometimes I don't always think it's courage, but I think it's confidence. And there's the work on confidence, LaToya. Now, when men will go for a job, they might only know 50% of the job, but they'll go ahead and apply for it anyway. But women will only be courageous and have confidence if they know 90% of a job. And so what I often ask, especially when I'm mentoring and coaching women, is what is it going to take to give you that, cultivate that courage and that confidence? We know it's education, it's mentors, it's also having that personal board of director, and it's doing our homework. And so each of us have to know what we need to have that armor for courage, and then be vulnerable and realize that we can't do it all.
Right. And here you talk about inspiring a bold vision, because being a leader, you have to create that team and you have to be able to move the crowd. Maybe your team is of 10, or maybe it's of an entire university, Dr. Wu. And so, you know, you talked about inspiring. It's a discovery of what needs to change and then finding the courage to embark on the essential steps to bring about that change. And what I loved about this particular practice is you hold up a mirror to women and you have us look at some really tough research. And I was marked by the Harvard Business Review research that you feature in here, where it talks about women scoring low on envisioning.
Right.
and not getting a lot of points because women, we score high usually on being generous, on being nice, on being liked, and then not seen as competitive compared to men. How do you inspire a bold vision when you're being told that you don't have a viewpoint, you can't have a vote, you don't have a vision in general, and then you're not very competitive because you happen to be a nice person?
Right. And so we have to change the paradigm. I was at a meeting yesterday and a male colleague said, boy, your career has moved very quickly. And I turned around and I said to him, because every place I've been, I've had a bold vision and I delivered on it. And as women, we have to own that. We have to think about the picture of the future for whatever position that we're in and how we're going to achieve that. And, we're nice, we're team players, but we don't think about vision. So what does that look like? It requires being strategic. It requires thinking about where you are in your organization and what those strengths are. And then how I can create this big picture that is going to differentiate the organization or the team. It's the picture for winning. It's the picture for standing out. It's being innovative. It's being creative. And, it's that bold, hairy, audacious goal. And then we have to go out there and tell the story and own it. Sometimes women want to be behind the scene or they want to give the vision to someone else. We have to own the vision and imprint our name on it and tell the story wherever we go about the vision.
Well, Dr. Lynn Boone, I know there's so many different things, but I have to ask about you specifically. When I hear you speak, you blow me away, and I'm sure you do that with so many different colleagues, male and female. And I say, well, where do you get that confidence? Is it because you grew up in Philadelphia? Is it because you attended the girls' high school? Because to move in a room, to move in a school of all women, is it a North Carolina A&T? Is it your MBA from Duke? Is it your PhD from University of Michigan? Is it the certificate in advanced educational leadership from Harvard University Graduate School? I mean, your credentials are ridiculous, but there's something about you. You have swagger, and that's the most compliment, and that's a compliment. And how do you have that? And where did it come from?
It is the village of women who have supported me. It's the women who are on this panel today. I was raised by strong women, my mother and my many aunties. I then went to North Carolina A&T and had a great cast of mentors and male allies that supported me through my education process. It's my life partner, my husband, but it really is every village that I've been in. I'm glad to be in the Boston Village now. They have lifted me, they have supported me, and they have given me that swagger. On Monday, I was talking about the Philadelphia grit. So you joked about Philadelphia, Latoya. And so each village has really supported who I am. And those girlfriends, I got through the pandemic through my girlfriend networks. And so I am very appreciative for that. And it's lifting as we climb, and it's what all of us do here today.
There's something about the work of the inclusive leader, and that's the final practice in this, at least in the lineup. And I think it's very, if you read the book, you see that it progresses in a way that sort of guides you. So committing to the work of the inclusive leader. And as I think about that for a moment, that can be it's inclusive, these buzzwords that have real meaning, but it's some folks can turn their ear off to it because they say, well, you know what? Listen, we've hired a diversity and inclusion leader. We have that person in place. We've donated to social justice causes in the wake of George Floyd's death. We've done our work. We're inclusive. We've covered our bases. Really explain the value of opening the C-suite, as you tweeted about when you were tweeting about this event, and why there is true value in inclusivity and opening and expanding that workforce.
Yeah, it's more than opening the door. It's creating cultures of belonging. It's making sure that every level of the corporate ladder, we have representation. And it's that people are thriving. And how do you do that? You have to build bridges. You have to invest in the future and the present. And you got to collect the data too. What gets measured gets managed. And so all of those are important. And the inclusive leader is always saying, who's at the table, who's not at the table, and how I'm going to ensure that all voices are heard and that they can thrive. And it's about equality and equity and belonging.
I looked at the praise for Arrive and Thrive, and boy, do you have some heavy hitters commenting on this book already. The CEO of Nike saying, that this basically has leadership for it's practical lessons that inspires all leaders that they can learn from. It's a must read for leadership. The resource we hear from Dr. Barry Posner, and then from the WNBA, the commissioner of the WNBA, and I'm obsessed with women's basketball right now. She talked about how, and I want to get this right, in an era where so many of us think that we are just surviving in this complex business world, this book will inspire you to move from survive to thrive, from survive to thrive. As I have to wind down my conversation, unfortunately, I want to get people and shift people's thinking, because in this pandemic, you have survived, but now there's an opportunity to really thrive here. How do we shift that thinking? How do we make that shift in our own minds and in our own hearts that this is our time, truly?
Truly. You know, my last thing before we turn it over to the panel is that we have to own our stage. And as you talk about going from surviving to thriving, I talk about from the she session to the she recovery. And so one, we have to acknowledge that women need to be in the workforce and we need to shatter the concrete ceiling. We need systems and institutional policies that acknowledge that women have caring responsibilities and we're trying to do it all and that can support them in the workplace. And then we need pathways that women can enter and exit the workplace and have flexible careers. And then finally, I want to say that we need mentorship and systems that support women of color, because we know we are often neglected in every industry. And it has to be systems change and bold vision if we're going to see parity.
Dr. Lynn Perry-Wooten, would you please just follow me around and keep me going when I'm feeling down, because your presence is something else. I know that you may not even know what you radiate, but it really is, it's so impactful to me that I had a chance to speak to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us some gems, and we will be benefiting from this and Arrive and Thrive. If you haven't gotten a chance to put your order in, I'm giving a commercial to you because I happen to really get something from this book. Thank you for your time, Dr.
Thank you for all you do, and a great interview and great energy, Latoya.
Thank you so much. Colette, back to you.
Thank you, Latoya and Lynn. You guys rocked. This was, those nuggets are just so powerful. And now we are going to get to the meat of the matter, taking the Arrive and Thrive and talking about corporate boards and what can we do? What should we do? How can we engage our white male and female allies to really support moving the dial and getting more Black women into C-suites and on corporate boards? So it gives me great pleasure to turn this over to Paris Alston, and I can't wait to hear from this powerhouse panel.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Colette. And I have to just tell you, when you were reading the intros, it almost brought a tear to my eye. I'm just so honored to be in such good company, such wonderful, regal company of all of these powerful women. And as someone who is coming up in the younger generation, it means a lot to me to be able to collect these gems so that I can arrive and thrive and help other people do that as well. So like you said, we have this powerhouse of a panel, and I am really, really excited to hear more about what it means when a Black woman steps into a corporate boardroom, what it means when she takes over, at the head of a company. And Agnes, I would like to start with you and just have you tell us a little bit about your board experience, but also give us that inside look of what does it mean when you take a seat at the table.
Thank you. And thanks, Colette, for inviting me to this conversation today. And I tell you, Dr. Wooten, I was ferociously writing notes. My right hand hurts because of it. So thank you. Can't wait to get your book and share it with a lot of younger people and people our age, because it's always a case, I believe, as you suggest, of learning. And I'll talk about that as I talk about my board journey. I'm currently on the board of Truist Financial Corporation. It's the 6th largest bank in the United States. I serve on its risk committee and governance committee and trust committee. I'm also on the board of Appfolio, which is a software company headquartered in Santa Barbara. And I'm also on the board of R1RCM, which is a healthcare fintech company. Last year, I was actually on 4 boards. The 4th board was a private company that made the decision to have internal board members rather than those of us who were independent external board members. So I serve on those 3. And I can tell you the journey in terms of getting onto a board for me was sort of interesting. I started in 2016, the fall. I was called by a recruiter, and it was a recruiter that I had worked with previously in terms of sourcing particular candidates for various roles. I was asked about a role to be a compliance officer over on the West Coast. And at the time, I was already commuting to New York for a job with the government with the CFPB. Did not want to commute to California, but sourced some individuals, and one of them actually got the role. Well, later, about 6 months later, I get a call from that same recruiter who asked if I might be interested to be on a corporate board. And it was literally the same day that I gave my resignation to the CFPB. I said, sure, but let me call the ethics department first to make sure I could even have this conversation with you. And I did, and it really jump-started a very quick approach. It was 92 days literally from the day of getting that call to formally being approved by the shareholders. And a couple of the gems that Lynn spoke about were really important here. The networking, the mentoring. As soon as I got that call, I went to a couple of my mentors. Please tell me how I should go about the interviewing process, because it was 2 weeks later that it began with the actual board. Always perform and really do the best you can, because you never know who's watching. Well, it turned out that they had already had a long profile on me. The recruiter and then the company, they had been talking to people for various reasons. And so when I got that call, it was more on me to sort of quote unquote fit in or do well during the interview. They were sort of set on me. They wanted an attorney. They wanted a person that had regulatory experience and risk. And the company itself, SunTrust at the time, which is now part of Truist, it merged with BB&T a couple of years ago. It's now Truist. SunTrust had 2 Black men on the board, and it had 2 women. So I was sort of the twofer, and the Black woman, for them, but they also wanted some specific expertise. So for me, it was a very interesting process.
It does. It sounds interesting indeed. And Stephanie, please tell us a little bit about your board experience, but also the impact that you've been able to have in serving in those capacities.
Thanks, Paris, and thank you all. It's awesome to be on a call with so many amazing women. And thanks, Colette, for all the years you and I have been able to collaborate. I really appreciate you allowing me to show up, and then me allowing Get Connected to show up. So I've been on nonprofit boards for about 20 years now. I chaired 3 boards throughout those 20 years, and I sit on 3 boards today. One, Cambridge College, which is a local college here in Massachusetts that has about 4,000 students, and that's where I am the audit chair. So I really appreciate the work that I do there from the standpoint of I actually get to bring my technology experience and my HR experience to that organization. And I've been there for about 3 years, a little over 3 years. I also sit on the Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council, where I really contribute to the DEI strategy for a lot of very large tech companies within our region, helping them think about ways to increase the diversity in the tech pool for the state. And then finally, I sit on the Dukes County Personnel Board, which is a Massachusetts board, where I am contributing at the HR level, really helping navigate issues and really focusing on kind of what are the mass our mass laws and how that impacts our mass laws, which is a really interesting place to be from the standpoint of the learning that takes place on that board. And so I would say, just overall, I have 20 plus years of technology experience. People may think of me as DEI today because I've been in the DEI space for the last 6 years, but my background is tech. And being in the tech industry, I was always the only one, the only Black woman and most of the time the only Black person. And so I had to learn to navigate a man's world all the time. And actually I had some amazing mentors throughout that time that helped me figure out how to go about doing that. And just being able to be myself and actually cultivate those relationships, I think have allowed me to do a lot of the work that I do today. And so I would just, encourage folks to really think about who's in your circle, because your circle really does matter. And, obviously I would not have anything that I have today without all my female partners in crime, I say. But because I came up in tech, I have a lot of white allies.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
Paris, if
go
I
ahead.
just might interject something, Stephanie talked about her longstanding not-for-profit leadership work. That's very important to securing a board seat. In my first board's interview, they asked about my not-for-profit work. So that's a very, very key piece.
So I hope I'm on a journey to find that first corporate board. So whoever's listening, please. But no, honestly, I love my nonprofit board experience because I get a chance to do a lot of give back work in that space. And that's very, very, very important to me as an individual.
I do want to come back and delve deeper into that. But first, Juliet, please tell us about your corporate board experience and how, obviously how you got to it, but what advice you would have for people who may be interested in jumping into this.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, first, congratulations again, Colette, on 14 years. I am really, really proud to have been part of the foundation of Get Connected and delighted to see where you've taken it definitely to new heights. And so thank you for having me, and great to see all my friends on the call. And Dr. Wooten, also a pleasure to be a Simmons alum and also a fellow at the Institute for Inclusive Leadership at Simmons. So lots of great connections here, which is really the hallmark of a lot of the work that I do. And I'll start with the boards that I'm currently on. And technically, Eastern Bank is now a publicly traded company. And I'm on the board of ambassadors for Eastern, but not on the executive board. So I just want to be clear about that. I have a lot of great experience, like Stephanie said, also, both in terms of boards and commissions and also not-for-profit boards. I currently serve on the Mass Higher State Workforce Board as an appointee of Governor Baker. And that board, as you may know, advises the governor on building strong workforce strategies, and was obviously very busy during the pandemic. The other board that I'm on, the Boston Women's Workforce Council, which really the focus there is on wage equity. And for that one, I was appointed by former Mayor Marty Walsh. And also I'm the former emeritus board chair for Action for Boston Community Development, which is better known as ABCD. So it's run the gamut, and the central thing with all of those really has been networking. Every single one of those boards came from people reaching out to me, having conversations and so forth. And as many of you know, which is one of the reasons I saw the value of Get Connected 14 years ago, one of my areas of expertise is strategic networking. And so my book, The Guide to Strategic Networking, actually I cover a lot of these things, but and many of you on the call are in that book. So I want to underscore the importance there of really not just doing the networking, but doing it strategically. Dr. Wooten talked about having a vision, and I was like, oh, you're speaking my language here, and how important that is. So really, as Black women, really being clear about what it is that you want, understanding your value, and owning your success. And that means not letting other people define what your success should be, but really creating that roadmap for yourself of what is it that you're trying to achieve. And if one door closes, then let's go to a couple of windows, open a couple of windows, not taking no, not settling for what other people want for you, but creating that path that you see for yourself, and network, but networking intentionally, having that plan and making sure that you're really keeping those connections very warm and being open and to other networks, because oftentimes we have very strong networks, obviously, within our own communities. And it's really important to expand outside of those communities, outside of your industry, outside of your comfort zone, because that's really where you begin to experience growth. So it's delighted to be here, and look forward to more of the conversation.
Thank you for that, Juliet. And I just want to give a note to our audience that you can, if you have a burning question, you can submit that in the Q&A using the Q&A function here on Zoom. I know there are folks throwing some comments in the chat too, so you can feel free to do that. We'll do our best to work them in, to integrate them in. Can't promise you we'll get to all of them, but we will do our best. So each of you, and I also want to mention too that Dr. Wooten is still sticking around, so we'll be looping you back into the conversation shortly, don't worry. So each of you did speak about your nonprofit experience, or at least having some experience in that world. And so let's talk more about that, about this, how that experience serves you well when it comes to working in the private sector, or being on a board with people who maybe don't have that nonprofit experience.
I'll start that. One thing I would say is that obviously being on any kind of a board is having to work collaboratively, working as a team player, bringing your own area of expertise to add to the conversation and to solutions that need to be resolved internally. Being able to get along with people, being able to be yourself and be your true self, but also the ability to get along with people. Having leadership roles in the not-for-profit world, being the executive director, being the chair of the board, being the chair of a committee, also helps you be able to show that you can lead different types of conversations, lead different areas of expertise. So that's one area in particular. Not-for-profits are really a good grooming for corporate board work, at least the first board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would also say it's a place to build your level of confidence. Mm-hmm. If you start small and you learn to navigate the governance of a board, the different committees that are on a board, show up on those committees and learn what you're good at, it will help you navigate to more larger corporate boards, because there are many nonprofit boards that act like corporate boards. They have budgets like corporate boards. They have organizations designed like corporations. And so you get a chance to really understand kind of where you can contribute, as well as grow your expertise. And I call test out what you may not be comfortable testing out inside your company. And that's where some of the leadership characteristics and qualities can come from that you now can take back into your company.
Stephanie, I love how you talked about being a confidence booster, working on nonprofit boards. And if you think about the journey, you start your career being an individual contributor, and then you become a leader of a team, and then a leader of leaders. And the board level is another level of a leader of governance. And the nonprofit boards build your confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to throw something out here.
No, go ahead, Colette.
Juliet. I want to throw something out here, because we have a number of people who are on this chat, and I want to ask these women if you could say something to both white male and white female allies who might have access to board opportunities about some specific things. I'm a firm believer in call to action.
Mhm.
what specific things could they be doing as allies to help women, Black women in particular, make that transition to corporate boards? Because it seems like when it comes to Black women, all of a sudden the rules change. You know, it's like, well, you have to have managed $200 million. Well, I don't know too many Black women in the C-suite that has done that, but that
Right.
should not eliminate some very, I would say, brilliant and women who have done the work. Somebody like
Right.
a Stephanie Brown, a Colette Phillips, a Dr.
Right.
Wooten, a
And
Juliet Mayers. You
Yeah.
know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And
Yeah,
Colette, if I could
I-
add to that, I was sorry. Well, I was just going to add to that, Juliet. I mean, I think just finding, right, if someone is interested, how, like, not even necessarily knowing, okay, how do I raise my hand and say, consider me?
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and it, to answer the question, what would I say to them? And I have a number of these conversations, particularly on the work that I do in terms of coaching executives. And the usual thing is, well, we don't know anyone, or we don't can't find anyone. The pipeline, we've all heard all of these, and I will be blunt in calling them excuses. Because at the end of the day, it's about the relationships. And I think one of the valuable things, which is demonstrated here by Get Connected, but is also very powerful when it comes to boards, everyone will say how important networking is, yet people don't necessarily take the time to get to know people, to build the relationships, and even when they do invite people in, to truly give them a sense of belonging and getting to know them. So I would say the number one thing is to really build authentic relationships with Black women. And that means stepping out of your comfort zone. And it means really following up and doing what you say you're going to do, and making people feel welcome when they are at the table, and supporting them by being an active ally, not just passively sitting by.
And I would take that a step farther in terms of going through that step. But then the next step is the strategic networking that we've talked about. When I first was working years and years ago, there was an article in Cosmopolitan, August 1981, How to Get a Job on Capitol Hill. Essentially, look into your background, see what in your background might align with a member of Congress, a committee, and whatnot. I went through the process, ultimately got 5 offers. I grew up on a farm, went to the Agriculture Committee. I lived in Ethiopia, went to the Committee on Africa, lived in Massachusetts when I went to college, went to the Massachusetts delegation. So as you're networking, look at what you could offer to an organization, to a company. Look to see who you might know. Look to see who you might know that might know someone, and develop that kind of a strategic relationship. Look for people who are on nominating governance committees, because they're the ones that are constantly sourcing and thinking about new potential board members. Look at your organizations. While we were talking, I just got a notice from women corporate directors, and looking for possible candidates for certain roles. So look at the organizations that are working on this, the ones that aren't that expensive and aren't asking you for an arm and a leg to join and making promises, but really trying to be a strategic networker by looking into your background and seeing how you might be able to offer assistance and guidance to an organization, because you've got the experience there to do so.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to say, I would definitely agree around, taking a really strategic approach to your, I love Juliet's, the circles, because I've used that to figure out how, who's in my circle, who's not in my circle, and who should be in my circle based on what I want to do. And you can actually use that same process even for navigating how to move your career along. If you're looking to move up in your company, whether it's to the C-suite or right close to the C-suite, you have to have a network that actually knows what you do and how well you do it in order for that to make sense. And it can't just be I'll call your direct boss, because that does not necessarily always work. But if you think about moving into the C-suite and finding people to be in the C-suite that are people of color or women of color, it requires you to know a lot of people. And that's probably one of the things that I have really been excited about the work I do around finding women to actually go into our C-suite. And that's because you have a big network, and that big network you can call on to find those folks, as well as find them to help you find other folks. So it's all about really thinking about how you use your network in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Wooten, as someone who, is the president of a university and works very closely with the university's board of trustees, how do you make room for that networking to happen?
Yeah. That's important. The network has to happen, and wherever we're thinking about new trustees, I'm always challenging any board I'm on. And this goes back to Colette's question to say, who's not at the table? And it's what you said too. How do we break the mold? Stop going to the same list over and over again. And this is the homework for our allies on corporate boards, and break the mold and say, okay, what Black women do I know in a network, or who knows a Black woman? And how am I going to elevate them and get them on a board? So it's breaking the mold. It's throwing the Rolodex away and doing something different and challenging the status quo. That's the only way we're going to get diversity on board, is when people think outside the box.
Well,
I do want to,
I was
ahead,
going to say that Dr. Wooten follows her own advice. Within the first, I think, 6 months that she was in town, Gary Bailey connected us. And, we have been connected ever since. So, again, networking and connections are so critical to moving the dial.
Absolutely. And there's an audience question here from Bianca, and I think it's a really important question, but I know there's some other audience questions that I want our panelists to get to, but Bianca's asking about finding a mentor and how to do that. And I'll just quickly say, Bianca, I think it's helpful when you just reach out to people sometimes. When you go to events like this, if you see people and you have a way to reach out to them and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you said on this panel. I would love to connect with you further. I don't want to speak for all the ladies here, but I think many people would welcome those sorts of messages, would welcome connecting on LinkedIn and trying to meet with you, for a Zoom 15 minutes or for coffee, and then keep doing that, right? That's the key part of mentorship, is keeping in touch, following up, all of those sorts of things. And panelists, as I come to you with some of these other questions, if you have other gems for Bianca on the mentorship piece, feel free to throw them in there. I do want to get to a question that Donna is asking of the panelists about showing vulnerability when you're in these spaces. As Black women, we talked earlier about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson getting pummeled last week, right? In a space that was being very critical of her. Many people were also being supportive of her on the Senate Judiciary Committee, but people were dogging her out really intentionally. And I'm wondering, has that ever happened to any of you? Have you ever felt at any moment in these spaces that, oh, they're coming at me kind of hard, and maybe second guess, are they coming at me because of who I am and what I look like? And how do you counteract that?
It's is it because I'm Black question.
Yeah.
I know.
I was just asking it sometimes.
I know. I personally, quite frankly, have asked that question in many circumstances. And I think when you're the only one and you're in a situation where you feel that there's bias, or you perceive that there is some sort of, and oftentimes it's not unconscious. I know that I actually teach about unconscious bias, but I quite frankly think a lot of these things are intentional. And it's the reality of being in the space that we're in and in the rooms that we're in. And I think it's really important, as Dr. Wooten and others had pointed out, of that the importance of that confidence and owning your success, owning who you are, and not allowing others to derail you, because oftentimes the efforts are intentional, but you still have to assume, even though they may be, assume positive intent and rise above it and continue to focus on providing whatever that excellent service is, or product, or whatever it is, just making sure it's outstanding and excellent. Because like it was very clear with Judge Brown, it's there's a double standard, right? It's so clear that yes, the bar is here, but you know what? You have to go 2 times and 3 times beyond what is required and what was expected of others. And I have to say, oftentimes it is because you're Black. So that's my
I would also say, attitude matters.
Mhm.
And you really have to check your attitude sometimes when things happen. And think about, okay, how can I turn this into a positive? And that sometimes is really hard in the moment, but at every opportunity will always, like, if you think of glass half full versus glass half empty, what can I do to take whatever is coming at me right now and flip it?
Mhm.
And if there are other people in the room that are a part of your ally group or part of your team, Team Stephanie, bring them into the conversation and enlist someone to support you. So there's always an opportunity for us to think about our attitudes and how we show up. And Lord knows with Zoom, when you think about your face on Zoom, you can check your face on Zoom on a continuous basis, because it is hard when you're looking at a group on Zoom all day long and trying to just manage how you show up. But it's important for you to think about how your attitude shows up in person.
Like we saw last week, she used her brilliance, persevered, and when she had enough, she said she wasn't answering any more questions. And I think that's a great example of what she did and how we all have to deal with those difficult situations.
Mhm.
You know when she was serious last week.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I think one quick thing I want to mention here, because I think those are all excellent points, and we talk a lot about authenticity, right? About being authentic and at the same time watching your attitude being positive. And the reality of is that we are also human beings. And, we have to make sure that we're taking good care of ourselves and our mental health and knowing when enough is enough. And so that was a great example, Dr. Wynn, of the enough is enough example. But for all of us, we really have to pay attention to all of this outside stimulus that oftentimes it's not positive, and you have to make sure you take care of you. So
yeah, well, you can be serious too. And we need to know when it's time to be serious when things happen to us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're coming out. It's just after 1 o'clock, but I do want to ask one last question of each of our panelists to round it out, and we'll kind of go around in a rapid fire sort of headline style. What is one thing that, whether it's higher ed institutions like Simmons, or whether it's bringing up younger people throughout different organizations, what's one thing we should be doing to better prepare young Black women to attain leadership roles like the ones we've been talking about?
Take risks.
I would say continuous learning, of really commitment to constantly sharpening the saw.
And let me just give a little plug to my friend, Dr. Wooten, who is having her Simmons Women's event coming up in 2 weeks. So this is the kind of things that young people can go to. And if you work for a company, to encourage your company to support these events. So great question, Paris.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, and Dr. Wooten and Stephanie, did you want to give a drop a gem really quick?
Go ahead.
I would just say, build your own mentor circle. I mean, you can have a mentor who is a peer. And so it does not have to be someone that's very, 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 very high up in an organization to be a person that actually gives great value. So create your own mentor circle because you can get a lot out of it.
And Dr. Wooten?
Invest in those confidence boosters. Invest in your education, have a diversity of experiences, be known for having execution capability and relationships.
And books like yours, right? I feel like that would be
Like
a good
mine and
resource.
Juliet's and read.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
And network, right, Colette?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, ladies, thank you all so very much. This has been such a pleasure. Colette, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Well, thank you, Paris, and thank you, LaToya, and this powerhouse panel. You know, the gems that you guys and information you have dispensed is invaluable. I want to say to all of the women, the impactful women who are on this webinar, some of whom we cannot see, that our next step that Dr. Wooten and I are going to keep getting into good trouble and leveraging the women on this panel and others in our circle to really do a call to action. That is our next level of how do we engage with white male allies who basically are on the cusp. They're the ones that are in the C-suites and on the the CEO offices. How do we engage with them and task them so that they can begin to fully begin to move the dial for Black women in the C-suite and in the boardroom? You know, Ann Richards, the former governor of and the late governor of Texas, used to say, if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. So we definitely don't want to be on the menu. We want to be in the room and at the table. And as one of my sheroes, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm used to say, if they don't have a seat for you at the table, bring your folding chair, which is what these Black women have done today. We have all brought our folding chairs. And I want to thank everyone who took the time to be here and to engage with us. And please stay connected. Thank you so much. And thanks you to the team, Mary Helen, to all of our interns, to Ryan Littner, and everyone who worked to make this possible. So thank you.
And congratulations again to Get Connected.
Yes, big congrats.
Thank you, Colette, for all you do for the Boston.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.